And so, glancing at the standings today, as that front bunch of dog teams come into the cripple checkpoint in Iditarod, uh, we saw a little bit of a video snippet of Brent's team arriving, and they looked tired but happy. Their front dogs were wagging their tails. I don't think it's a dog team that's got hammered by that on that run by any means. Sort of like I think Danny Seavey was alleging and suggesting on the CV Iditarod Facebook page. So, and there wasn't any footage of Dallas coming in or Ryan Reddington coming in or Mitch or Hugh upon arrival at Cripple at the halfway point in Iditarod 50, Iditarod 2022 this morning yet from the insider thing. Again, I'm not subscribing, but just in terms of how the dog teams look. When Brent arrived, it's not snowing. It's snowing back there down the trail, kind of a wet snow. Is Aaron Burmeister rolls through Ophir and his Richie Deal, packs up coming off his 24-hour layover and takes off on the trail towards Cripple, departing from the Ophir checkpoint. And is that snow and that weather going to go up there? And is it going to be snowing the entire trip as he follows those teams to Iditarod? Obviously, having a little bit of traffic down on that trail from Ophir to Iditarod. It said somewhere online that the Iron Dog, the snow machine race this year, didn't follow along that northern route of the Iditarod. So it was probably or the suggestion at least was that it was sort of a wet and sloppy trail for those front runners, for Brent on that way. Brent's team, the hard truth though is this year they didn't get taxed in the 1,000-mile Yukon Quest, and Brent, he's done enough long runs and training and stuff like that. And I don't know. I wasn't watching the tracker how much, if he did stop on the trail from Ophir to Iditarod, but in this day and age, dog teams can do a long run, and how much the other teams also stopped by watching the tracker on that trip. From Ophir to Iditarod, that top bunch, Hugh, Mitch, Ryan, in terms of giving the dogs a break, out there on the trail. Not snowing on them as they get into Cripple, or at least not for Brent, but snowing for those teams just a little bit back, going through McGrath, going through Takata. And I guess I made a mistake when I was asking about who took a 24 in Takata this year, the race, because of all the COVID stuff, just going through Takata. So it wasn't even an option for those dog teams to take a 24-hour layover in the checkpoint of Takata, which in the past is a very popular place, strategic place, because of the access to, I think the access to warm place, the food, the running water, etc., is what sort of that checkpoint's been known for. Plus, strategically, just where it's at, it's a good location. So it's going to be sort of interesting to watch. For instance, like Cripple and Ophir as a checkpoint, you take a 24-hour layover, there just really isn't much amenities. It's a very barren place. I think there's a wall tent for a musher to sleep in. It's not as a warm area, and the running water, and then obviously all of the gifts and the food provided hospitality-wise from the locals. Takata is known for all kinds of pies and stuff like that, beyond the supplies that the musher sends out in their checkpoint drop bags. So, in terms of strategy at this point, again, I think, you can see the other teams pull in. You can see Mitch and Hugh are right there in the thick of things. Richie Deal leaving Ophir. He's got a great team, but he's down a couple dogs. He's at 11 dogs. We're looking at Aaron Burmeister coming off his 24-hour layover. He's having a good run. He's got a great dog team, but he's a big guy, like I said. He's also down to 11 dogs after he's departed McGrath on his 24, and he's rolling through Ophir. Now, out on the trail, on the way, in pursuit of the front runners who are now resting in the Cripple checkpoint. And sort of the big question is, all that traffic of that front half a dozen, maybe half a dozen plus dog teams out there on the trail between Ophir and Cripple, is it going to make the trail better, potentially, or worse, potentially, for Aaron Burmeister, for Richie Deal, as they're leaving Ophir and in pursuit and on the way to Cripple now? A little bit of snow falling also in Ophir, it looked like, as Richie Deal was packing up and getting ready to go. And, I glanced again at the standings, see Jesse Holmes, Paige Drobny, I think, is the other one. I'm not sure who she is from Squid Acres Kennel, but I think she has 13 dogs. Jesse's got 14 prior to their departure from their 24 in Ophir. And they're positioned pretty good in my mind. Even if it's snowing a little bit, they just had more scent in terms of the dog teams on the trail, and they've got two more teams packing that trail, at least in terms of Aaron and in terms of Richie ahead of them. but both those guys are down dogs. So, in terms of the numbers of the sled dogs still in the team, uh, Aaron and Richie are down to 11. This isn't a 16 dog race. So, like, back in the day, traditionally, Iditarod, originally you'd have 20 dogs back in the day when it was like Susan Butcher and Swenson and those early years of the Iditarod Trail sled dog race. But I'm just sipping my coffee here and haven't even done anything this morning, but just glanced at the laptop, just jumped on some Wi-Fi just because I was kind of curious to see because last night they were saying Dallas got in, but it took a long time for the standings to update to show Dallas's arrival out there in Cripple. But what I was saying is back in the day with a 16 dog roster, you're down a couple dogs. Or 3 dogs, you still got 13. And 13 is a big difference in terms of the dog team size, power, and ability for that to translate to speed and comfort for Musher at a halfway point, and then 11. You know what I mean? So if you got 13 dogs and you're in the middle of a 1,000-mile race, that's still a great big team. But if you've only got 11, that's a significant difference. In other words, so the transition from a 16 dog race to a 14 dog race in terms of how they structure the Iditarod Trail sled dog race, in terms of how many dogs that the Mushers can have out there on the team, that's sort of a big thing. We can't underestimate that because specifically we're here at the halfway mark and we're looking at this and how this sort of has evolved and how these teams are looking in terms of their numbers. And, if these guys, if for instance, a Richie Deal or for instance, if an Aaron Burmeister right now where they were at had dropped a couple dogs, specifically, I guess 3, but they, had 13 still on the roster, they would be much better positioned in terms of being able to finish out this race competitively than where they're at with only 11 on the roster, especially again underlining and emphasizing the fact that Aaron's no lightweight guy. This was a wrestling match because Dallas Levy did some wrestling when he was in high school. Dallas would never be competing against a guy who's 50 or 60 pounds or potentially even more and just taller, but heavier and bigger in terms of a competition. There would never be a eye-to-eye match like that in terms of a wrestling or in terms of a boxing match. So having an advantage of being a lighter weight jockey out there, in this type of sporting event, a mushing sporting event where the dogs are pulling the musher, obviously, you can be fit. And Aaron certainly is mentally, and also in terms of just experience, he's well suited for the trail. And just glancing at his dog team as they roll through Ophir, that's a very fast, quick moving, happy, healthy dog team. And I have a high expectation he's going to be able to get them to know him in a competitive fashion. But what I'm trying to say is, being a lighter weight musher, I said that before, it's just simply straight up a advantage that is very easy to leverage, in this specific sport, especially with how they've restructured the race and made it so that, the mushers only can start with 14 dogs, 2 less than they were for decades before, where they used to be able to start with 16 dogs. So, and if Aaron still had 14 dogs on the roster right now, we wouldn't have the conversation. But he's already down 3, so he's only got 11, and he's cruising up the trail great. But if he drops 2 more between where he's at Ophir and Caltag, and then he's going up over the hills on the way to Uniclete, doing the Blueberry Hills on the coast, going over Topkack, and he's already down under 10 dogs, he's not even going to be part of the conversation in terms of a top 3 finish for sure, probably even a top 5 finish. But if those 11 the dogs are just solid and are with him, and he's got 10 plus dogs for the rest of the race, he could still be in the mix for sure. But I glance at Mitch and Ryan, 17 hours traveling time to the checkpoint of Cripple where they're taking their 24, and I just question without reviewing the data from the GPS and seeing how much those dog teams stopped out there on the trail in terms of rests between Ophir and Cripple, the halfway. What exactly happened out there for those guys, Mitch and Ryan? Did they take 2 rest stops? Are they just going extremely slow? And how did their dogs look when they came into that checkpoint too? Because it's potential for some top teams to be pushing too hard and to have sort of a meltdown. It's also potential for them to have made some brilliant strategic decisions out there and have decided to slow down and give the dogs adequate rest, like run 4 hours, rest 4 hours, run 4 hours, rest 4 hours. Feed them a couple times and have maintained instead of running a straight 14-hour run or a 10-hour run and a 7-hour run, etc. And they might even be positioned to blow through and keep going to Ruby and take a 24 in Ruby. That's happened before with, like, for instance, Jeff King, etc. So it's without me having that additional data. It's really hard to get a feel, and also without having seen that other group at the front besides Brent pulling into Cripple. in terms of sort of the movement and the health and the attitude of those dogs, it's hard to make a decision. But glancing at Brent, he might be dropping a dog there. He's got an older leader, but both the lead dogs were wagging their tails, even if they were tired, even if it was warm, coming into Cripple. And Brent's sort of like a Labrador Retriever or Chesapeake Bay Retriever from Minnesota, where he's from. He's sort of an upbeat, happy guy. You could throw a snowball at him, cut his tire, and things could go wrong, but he could probably still keep a positive attitude himself. We can acknowledge and accept that as an attribute, and that sort of translates over. And his dogs sort of have that same upbeat attitude, and that's one of the things that was taught to me when I was back there doing the mushing, that you can kind of control your mental attitude, and the dogs read off psychologically and feed off your own emotions. So if you kind of keep it positive, the dogs will stay positive. Just like if you were a coach of a basketball team or something like that, or if you were a coach and you were, you're leading an army platoon, if you keep sort of a positive expectation, those emotions and those attitudes are replicated by the entities, whether it's dogs, whether it's people around you, and it can help you get through difficult circumstances. So again, Brent's like an upbeat Labrador or something. Sort of his dogs aren't, they were kind of wagging their tails there. Even if they did a long run, even if it was warm and it was tough conditions, they have that going for them. And if it's sort of a warm race, that doesn't, and as long as it's not blowing and it's a hellhole out there on the coast, I think, Brent could potentially get through this, and come out on top. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how the other teams looked, how much rest they took, and how it sort of shakes out as it progresses up the trail to the river. But again, Richie and certainly Aaron just down a couple dogs. The big thing I'm noticing, even if they're looking great, even if they're positioned well, down on numbers, down to 11. Paige, Drobny, Jesse Holmes also going to be coming off their 24 at over in a little bit. If they're leaving with a full roster, if they can just keep it together, be conservative, but still move nicely down the trail and have that extra dog or two, even if they're an hour or two back, by the time they get out there and they're doing the run, like I'm saying, from Caltech to Euclid, they're going to be able to be moving potentially a couple miles per hour faster than someone who's going to be dropping down from 11 to 10, 9 dogs. And, they're going to eat up those teams. Even if they don't get a victory, they're going to be able to be knocking on the door for the top 5 and going to be able to be there positioned to pick up the pieces if, like Ryan Reddington, or if Mitch Seavey, or if Hugh Neff falls apart, or even if, Brett and potentially Dallas, something happens out there, which is, I did about anything could happen. It was back in the 80s where we saw the big coastal storms and you saw Mother Nature, all of a sudden take an active role in terms of shaping the narrative and shaping the standings of the race. And 50th anniversary, everything that's going on nationally, internationally, and just also with the weather, not out of the realm of possibility for Mother Nature to take a more active role in terms of shaping the narrative of this specific Iditarod 2022 race. Certainly some warm weather and some snow. It's going to be a big question mark coming out of Cripple on the way to Ruby. How is that trail going to be? And are those teams going to be, we're going to see Aaron and Richie, are they going to be going through their leaving a rest in Cripple before the guys as they want the 24? Is it going to be pretty much right, almost in tandem as Brent and as Dallas, as those fronters come off their 24 on the way to Ruby? And what is going to be the condition of that trail? Is it going to be precipitating and snowing as those front runners are pushing out to Ruby and out on the river? Which usually it's a little bit cooler out there on the river, the Yukon River, the interior of Alaska, but things aren't always typical and usual, and we've seen open water, we've seen some really soft, slushy trails out there, which would suck. I think, these guys want a cold, fast, hard trail. It's been warm the first portion of the race. Brent's an interior musher. Aaron Burmeister's an interior musher. Even someone from south central Alaska, like the Seavies, Dallas has been training Talkeetna, which is just a little bit north of Willow, quite a bit warmer than where Brent trains out in Eureka. And Mitch is down there in the Kenai Peninsula, another guy who's probably pretty positioned to execute and do well in warmer temperatures in terms of the dog's comfort level. So it's going to be, because, if you're training at 20, 30 below most of the year and all of a sudden you're in a race and it's 40 degrees above for over half of it, that's the one thing. But what I was saying with Brent was, this year he didn't do a 1,000-mile Yukon Quest. So whenever he's in the Iditarod, either he does great or whether he has a hard time, he's been running the quest. He does the quest. Sometimes he wins it, sometimes he doesn't. But so his dog kennel did two like mid-distance 300-mile kind of camping trips. Probably had a heck of a time this year on the quest, on the two ends of the quest. They don't even have a 1,000-mile race. They've sort of fallen apart. The Yukon Quest is sort of known for race officials on drugs who are withdrawing people for no reason, and all kinds of political corruption issues. And it's the point now where they can't even have a 1,000-mile race. They've been a mess for decades. The quest has, and sort of an embarrassment to the dog mushing community for quite a bit of time. But Brent didn't have Brent's dogs, his physical dogs, didn't do a 1,000-mile race before this 1,000-mile race this year in 2022. So it's a little bit different. And I think it's probably beneficial because they have more of a reserve. There was a period there where Lance Mackey was widely successful in Iditarod, and he would win both of those races, but he was an anomaly. Before that, it was almost unheard of to try to expect the exact same dogs to do back-to-back 1,000-mile races and to have, competitive finishes or to win both of those races. So, Brent's sort of almost given his dogs, they're set up a little bit nicer because they're reserves, they haven't been asked to do a 1,000-mile race earlier this season in 2022 yet. So, this is their first 1,000-mile race. So to them, this is freaking a walk in the park. Usually they already got to run another quest before they get to go run Iditarod. But again, I'm kind of talking up Brent, but like last year he was okay in the race, but it was an out and back race. You know what I mean? It was a freaking glorified junior Iditarod last year in 2022. They went out and they turned around. They went back to South Central. They went back to Willow to have a finish there. So he's at the halfway checkpoint now. His dogs psychologically and mentally think they're going to just turn around and go back to South Central. No, I mean, that's not how this race is going to go this year in terms of its layout. So there's a lot of race left. Brent's got to go conquer the coastal obstacle. He's got to get through the river. He's got a pack of, he's like a bear or a coon or something with a pack of hound dogs running after him, baying. And that's what those other competitors in the front group are basically sort of metaphorically like at this point. They're on the chase. They're in chase mode. They've got the runner tracks ahead of them. They know this guy's a little bit ahead of them. But, without seeing the video where the other guys pull into to cripple, I'm going to sort of reserve my predictions, my statements, also without knowing how much they rested there. It's on the way from over to cripple. Talking specifically Mitch, Dallas, Hugh, Ryan, that other front group that's taking that 24 at the halfway point. So it's a race that's anyone's race. If Brent was someone who's won the race 4 times before, if he was if he was Doug Swingley or someone like that, but Brent's had other issues on the coast in the future, in other in the past, but it's also important to note that this is a totally different dog team than like back in, I don't know, it's 2016 or whatever, where he was first or second going through cripple checkpoint, and led in the river and led out towards the coast. Petite and him both, but then he dropped way back to like 20th place and he had a problem up there. This is even though that was the same with Brent, totally different group of dogs. So that was like 6-7 years ago. If there's any dog in the team, it's probably only like one dog in the team. It's probably a totally different group of dogs. They didn't have that experience. So, it's a fresh slate in that perspective. We'll see how it all goes.